All right, welcome back to our daily read aloud because of Mr. Terupt. We have read 2 times now, and the last time we read, we did not get all the way through October, but we did talk to some more of the characters, and the major problem that happened was something to do with a fire. Can anyone tell us which kid caused the fire and what happened? Dylan? Yeah, Luke, the smart kid. He started it. How'd he start it? All right, he was mixing together chemicals, and he did not know how they would react. You have to be very careful when you do that. So he caused a chemical reaction that caused heat, and it started a fire. So Mr. Terupt kind of stood up for the kids, though. The fire marshal wanted to take down all their work in the hall, and he said, no way. And how did that change how some of the kids, like Jeffrey and Peter, felt about their teacher? Because it made an impact on Jeffrey.
They thought the teacher, Mr. Terupt, was going to blame it on them.
Yeah, they're kind of thinking, well, teachers usually don't stick up for the kids, but he did. And so Jeffrey thought, well, maybe I kind of owe him a little more, like I should try a little harder because he's pretty cool. All right, anything else anyone thinks they need to share? Angie?
They were planting plants in
Anna and Danielle?
Their plant got knocked over by someone we think that's a rat.
Okay, yes, they did get knocked over. Okay. All right, and we did learn a lot more about everyone's lives. All these kids have very different lives, kind of like all the people you'll meet throughout your life. Do you think most people you meet grew up exactly the same way you did? No. It's actually hard to find someone that grew up just like you did. So this book will help keep reminding you that everyone's different. We all have a backstory, right? We all have something that made us who we are. Okay. Next chapter is Danielle. Now remember, what's her name? Alexia has been really mean to Danielle and has made her cry. And now we're going to hear Danielle's side of the story. I ended up talking and playing with Jessica at recess. My troubles with Lexi weren't her fault. I told Jessica about Anna. Jessica thought Anna seemed nice, which was true. Anna was my science partner for the plant unit, and I liked working with her. You stay away from that girl, you hear me? Grandma said when I first mentioned Anna at home. Your grandmother's right, Danielle. That girl comes from a bad family, Mom said. She'll be a bad influence. I wanted to know why, so Grandma filled me in on Anna's family story. I just listened, but I couldn't help thinking about the Anna I knew. She didn't seem bad at all. In fact, I already liked her. I wanted her to be my friend. I figured that as long as I wasn't going over to her house, I could be friends with Anna at school. Before long, it was time to head inside. I walked alongside Jessica until I saw Lexi marching toward us. She had a mean scowl on her face. She looked mad, real mad, like a mama cow determined to keep you away from her new calf. I rushed ahead. I didn't want to fight. I felt bad for leaving Jessica behind, but I wanted to avoid Lexi. I hurried inside and hid in the bathroom, but Lexi found me. The bathroom door flew open, and she got right in my face. She told me all the mean things Jessica was saying about me. Like, you can even ask Katie or Emily. They'll tell ya. Little Miss California's a two-face. Nice to your face and mean behind it. You need to stay away from her. I started crying. Why would Jessica say those mean things? Lexi hugged me for a second, but it didn't make me feel any better. Then she walked toward the sinks. She stood in front of the mirror, fixing herself. I sat in one of the stalls, wiping my tears. Like, you know what else? Lexi said. Jessica's the only one who killed your plant. Like, she knocked it over on purpose. She told me. I've known Lexi since second grade. I've known Lexi since second grade when she was all nice. She even came over to my house once that spring, but her father's boas weren't a good match for my farm. I am so distracted right now. I'm hearing someone else over here. Feather boas. Feather boas weren't a good match for my farm, so she hasn't ever been back. Do you guys know what a feather boa is? It's kind of an older thing. It's a long strand of feathers that you can wrap around your neck. Okay, like a fancy thing. So she's very fancy. They're kind of saying she's high maintenance. All right. And then in third grade, she started with her mean games. So I've never been to her house. We're friends in school when Lexi says so, and that's it. Grandma says something's wrong with Lexi that we don't know about, and that it's best not to worry about being her friend. But I did worry. What was the truth? Was there anyone I could be friends with? Dear God, it's Danielle. I'm going to need your help sorting all this girl stuff out. I hope you don't mind. I'd rather not get Grandma involved. She doesn't always understand. Thanks. Amen. All right, now we're on to November. And the first chapter is Luke. Yes, Eric.
Birthday.
Huh?
Yeah, you forgot to do the birthdays for October. Remember Quinn brought the idea.
Oh, well, we're not going to worry about that. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, Luke. It was November. Apparently, that meant time for Mr. Terupt to get crazy with his math ideas again. I think he was on a mission to put us through his math gauntlet, $word. We're going to figure out the number of blades of grass in the soccer field, he announced one day. What? You're going to make us count grass, Peter yelled. That's nuts. No way, Nick was hollering, $word. How are we supposed to do that, Tommy said. I raised my hand. Yes, Luke? You mean we're going to estimate the total number, right? I said. Yes and no, Mr. Terupt said. We'll actually do some calculating to get a reasonable approximation. I was beginning to think that Peter might be right. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but I know we can do it, Mr. Terupt said. Besides, if everything we did were easy, then you wouldn't learn anything. You need to be challenged in order to learn. Mr. Terupt was right about it being a challenge. None of us had any idea how we were going to count blades of grass, but we did. First, we decided we wanted to count 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter squares, which was my suggestion after Mr. Terupt talked to us about sampling and how our government gets population numbers. Then we measured the squares on large pieces of cardboard, cut them out, so we were left with a piece of cardboard that had a 10 centimeter square missing in the middle. That was Mr. Terupt's suggestion. Now it would be easy to toss our piece of cardboard around the field and collect random 10 centimeter samples. So far so good. Time to head outside. We marched downstairs and out the front doors by the office. Then we stampeded down the sidewalk until the end of the building. The soccer field awaited us on the side of our school. Peter. She was bent over counting blades of grass. It was the perfect opportunity. Mr. T was busy helping someone else, so he was not going to see me in action. I gripped the cardboard with my best hold, dipped my knees a little, and let the frisbee fly. It zinged through the air on its mission like a missile from a fighter jet. Bullseye! Ow! Lexi shrieked. My tushy! I almost died of laughter. I dropped to my knees. I laughed so hard I couldn't stop. I couldn't catch my breath either. Lots of other kids were laughing too. Lexi yelled something about her tushy and me being a jerk. Everyone that missed out on the fun kept asking, "What happened? What happened?" Everyone except Mr. T. He came right over to make sure Lexi wasn't injured. Lexi was holding her tushy and hopping up and down, saying "ow" over and over. She's a total drama queen. Usually a teacher checks the spot that hurts, but I don't think Mr. T was real big on that this time. Peter, this is not funny, Mr. T said to me. Someone could have been injured. You're lucky you didn't hit anyone in the eye. Go sit down. I sat down. It was no big deal. If you'd been there, you'd agree. It was super funny. All right, do you guys agree that no matter who you are, if you'd seen that happen, it would always be super funny?
Yes.
All right.
And if it was
Sometimes it can be. When do you need to be careful when because this will happen in your life. Someone's going to do something funny at someone's expense. You're going to want to laugh. What do you need to be careful about in a situation like that? Because I would venture to say I would maybe have not thought that was funny. What do you guys think? Angie?
Well, it hit her in a different spot, but if it like was really hard and it hit her arm, she could probably break it or she'd get injured in her eye.
Yeah, well, if it hits anybody and they're having to hop around and yell, "ow," don't you think they probably got hurt? Okay, so just remember, even if something's kind of funny, doesn't mean you have to act obnoxious and laugh all over the place. No. Noah.
I think they laughed so loud because it was Lexi.
It could have been, right? Because she's so mean, it's hard not to laugh when she kind of gets what's coming. But remember, she's still a person. Do we know her whole story yet?
No.
No. All right, back to Luke. We spread out all over the place, tossing our cardboard squares and counting the blades of grass. Peter, however, was flinging his square like a frisbee, even though Mr. Terupt had warned us that it wasn't a toy and to be careful throwing it. Maybe if things had turned out differently that day, they would have turned out differently in the end, too. I think what happened on the soccer field just set us up for disaster later on. So, Peter was being his typical sneaky self, flinging his square and counting here and there. But as soon as he spotted Alexia bent over her square, he wound up and sailed a beauty in her direction. It was a perfect delivery, $word, that tattooed, $word, her fanny. Ow, she screeched. Luke, what the heck? What happened? Mr. Terupt instantly twisted, $word, around. Like, someone just hit me right in my tushy with their square, Alexia cried. The old buttocks again, huh? Mr. Terupt said. You okay? Yes, Alexia said. Mr. Terupt turned and looked out at us. We were laughing our heads off, and I swear I saw him smile as he shook his head at the whole scene. Peter, come over here, please, he said. Why me? Peter complained. Because we all know about how much you like the buttocks area, don't we? Remember, he's the one that keeps bringing it up for the $words and everything. Classic Mr. Terupt. Instead of blowing up, he was funny about it, but in a serious way. He sat Peter out for the rest of the activity and had a talk with him. Peter didn't pretend to be innocent, but like I said, I think this set us up for later. The whole thing seemed funny. No one got hurt. Peter sat out. That was it. Once we finished tossing and counting, we headed inside, where we learned how to average all our data. Then we took our average number and used it to predict the soccer field total by figuring out how many of our squares could fit inside the field. So they're kind of finding the area of the field, right? The number of blades of grass in our soccer field equals 77,537,412. That isn't an exact answer, of course, but it is an accurate estimate based on all of our calculations. Phew! I learned so much doing that project. It wasn't the stupid easy stuff I was used to getting from my teachers, that's for sure. We were math wizards, $word. All right, Jessica.
Are you the one that keeps on saying $word?
It's in the story. Every time I say that, it's in Luke's chapters. It comes right after an actual $word. All right, Jessica, Act 3, Scene 1. Things weren't going well. I had betrayed Alexia by being nice to Danielle, thinking that this is what Belle Teal would have done. That's the character in her book. And then Danielle suddenly turned on me, without warning. I knew Alexia was behind it. I was alone, except for the friends I had in my books, like Belle and Anna. In November, Mr. Terupt introduced us to a book that the whole class would be reading. The Summer of the Swans by Betsy Byers. I had never read this one, or anything by Mrs. Byers for that matter. This book won the Newbery Medal back in 1971, Mr. Terupt said. He held the book up. It's not full of action like you guys tend to think of action, but it is a beautifully written book that's going to give us an awful lot to think about, learn from, and maybe... Okay. Sorry, guys. Gave us an awful lot to think about, learn from, and maybe even change because of. I straightened up. I was excited. Peter moaned. As for Alexia, well, she was somewhere in La La Land. The boys made faces and the girls exchanged glances. Then Mr. Terupt went a step further. We're not just going to read this book, he said. We're going to do an activity with it, an ongoing activity, more like an experience. Now even Alexia was listening, back from outer space. What kind of activity? Peter demanded. Not some sort of stupid book project, I hope. I hate those. No project. I don't really like those things either, Mr. Terupt said. What did he have in mind, I wondered. You're going to make us dress up as characters, aren't you, Alexia said. Oh, I love doing that. Great idea. Get real, Peter said. Will you guys be quiet and let the Terupt finish? Jeffrey said. That worked. No more interruptions. And Mr. Terupt continued. I want you guys to think about this book. In the story, there's a boy with Down syndrome. All right. Josiah, you want to tell us about that?
My brother has Down syndrome. It's something that it like doubles one of your DNA things, and it changes the way you look and the way you act. But my brother has mostly autism, but still my brother does have Down syndrome.
Okay, that was a great description. So Down syndrome is just something that changes your DNA, like Josiah said. You can look a little bit different. You act a little bit different. You kind of view things around you in a different way. but they still have emotions and feelings and hopes and dreams, and they're just regular people that kind of view the world and act a little different, okay? So people with Down syndrome, we're about to learn more about them in the book, but this is going to be a big component of our book. So make sure everyone's clear on what this means. Okay, Abby?
I think my brother has Down syndrome. He has autism now.
Okay. You don't always have both. They're very different things. So just because you have autism does not mean you have Down syndrome. Josiah?
He can't talk, but usually people with Down syndrome can talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they usually are a little bit slower learning, and they usually are just, yeah.
Yeah, they're just different, right? But we're all a little different. So, I mean, I'm sure you're totally used to your brother and who he is, right? You still get to talk and hang out and do whatever you need to do with him. But you still communicate with him, right? You can...
He has an iPad.
Yeah. Madeline?
There's this kid in this women's classroom. We're not allowed to say their names because, Miss Molly says not to.
Yep.
But he's in a wheelchair and he's practicing walking, and I feel so bad for him, but it's fun to play with him on wonderful weekdays.
Yeah. Yeah, it's if you know any kids with Down syndrome, include them in your play. They're just like any other kid. They're just a little different. Zoe?
People with sicknesses they're always kind people.
Well, usually. I bet we could find someone that has some sort of a sickness that's not a kind person. But, yeah. I mean, when I look at anybody, my assumption is always good person, right? I never assume someone's a bad person. All right. So, I want you guys to think about this book. In the story, there's a boy with Down syndrome. That's a mental disorder. His name is Charlie. And his older sister, not much older than you guys, is named Sarah. They have a pretty special relationship. That's what I want all of you to think about. Mr. Terupt stopped for a second. Yet, somehow we stayed quiet. He continued. So, what you're going to do is visit our collaborative classroom downstairs over the next few weeks. You'll go in groups in the mornings and the afternoons and simply spend time with these children doing exactly what it is that they do. Mr. Terupt, I raised my hand. What exactly is the collaborative classroom? Still being relatively new to the school, I didn't know. All right, now I'm about to say a word that I will never say again, and this will be my lesson about never saying this word again, okay? And I'll let you raise your hand and tell me what was wrong with what I said. Peter said, "It's where all the retards go." Thank you for not laughing, most of you. It's the word. It's my least favorite word. I hate saying it. Zoe, what's wrong with that?
It's not nice.
Shh, Alex, be quiet.
It's not nice.
It's not nice at all, okay? It's one of the worst things you could say. Josiah, why is that hurtful?
Because for people who have special needs, it basically means you're calling them stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And also, is the book that they're reading called Rules?
Something about swans. I forget.
Well, I read this book called Rules, and it's the exact same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Noah?
It's mean to say, because that's their disability, and by saying that word, you're basically saying, hi, you have a disability, and I don't.
Yeah, you're making fun of people. You're trying to make someone feel bad. So, I will challenge every single one of you. Never, ever use that word. No one needs to use it ever again. When I hear adults say it, I will stop them in conversation, no matter who they are, and ask them not to say that in front of me. And you know what? They stop, okay? It's kind of hard to do that. It is stopping more. When I was a younger girl, that was a word people used all the time as an insult. And it's kind of going away now. So, keep it going, okay? If you hear someone say it, politely say, no, don't say that. That's not funny, okay? Hudson?
I didn't know what that word meant, but now I do, and now I'm like, okay, I don't want to say that ever in my life.
Right. Because some people don't know, right? So when someone says it, you don't have to come at them all mean, right? You can just be polite and say, I don't know if you know what that word means, but it's very hurtful, and you shouldn't say it. Okay? Quentin?
Is that what the teacher said, or is that what the kid said?
That's what Peter said when someone said, what's the collaborative classroom? That's what Peter said. Okay? So let's go on and see who laughs, because this is very telling. Alexia laughed. I hope you'll answer that question a little differently after this experience, Peter, Mr. Terupt said, his tone very serious. Peter didn't say another word. It's a classroom for children with a range of special needs, Jessica, Mr. Terupt continued. Some of you are probably a little nervous or even scared. That's why you'll go in groups. I hope you'll feel different afterwards, too. Now, why do you think Mr. Terupt is going to have them read a book about someone with special needs and then go down to the collaborative classroom and spend time with students who have special needs? Cadence?
So if you ever meet a person with some special needs, you'll like, I don't know how to explain it, but they're yeah.
You kind of know better how to treat them, right? If you've learned about it, you've been around people, it doesn't seem so scary anymore. Josiah?
Yeah, my mom's there was someone who called my brother that.
Mm-hmm. So that was probably not fun to deal with. Yeah.
It was at an airport.
Oh, okay. Angie?
I'm a little worried about the group.
About the groups? You worried they won't be nice?
I'm worried that Alexia's gonna be with someone she's been with.
All right, we'll see. Do you think when the kids go down to this room that it might change how they think about people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Zoe, you think so? Yeah, I kind of think that's what Mr. Terupt is hoping. All right. Act 3, Scene 2. We're still on Jessica. My group consisted of Anna and Jeffrey. I still hadn't quite figured Jeffrey out. On the other hand, I'd been eating lunch with Anna ever since being ostracized by Alexia and her clan. Danielle was back in, I was out. But I didn't want back in. I much preferred my time with Anna. She's quiet, but she's a lot smarter than everyone thinks. She's the only girl smart enough to stay out of Alexia's nonsense. Her mom's advice, she told me. We haven't talked about her mom or any of that stuff I learned from Danielle, and I haven't told her anything about me either. For now, we've kept our secrets, and that's okay. I like Anna. She'd make a great friend to a character in my book or in one of Dad's plays. I know she's going to be a great friend of mine. We were very quiet on our first trip downstairs. Not one of us uttered a single sound. My hands longed to hold a book, but I hadn't brought one, so I bit at my fingernails and cuticles instead. It's funny how when you're anxious to get somewhere, the journey seems to take forever. And when you're not too anxious, the journey is over in no time. My journey from California lasted about as long as a ride on the Viper roller coaster, and our journey to the collaborative classroom took no time at all either. When we arrived, it was clear the teacher was expecting us. "Hi guys," she said. "Welcome to our collaborative classroom. I'm Miss Kelsey." We introduced ourselves, and then she let us inside. "This is Joey." Miss Kelsey pointed to a little boy with boogers all over his face. "Can you say hi to our friends, Joey?" Miss Kelsey asked. Joey waved in our direction. A gigantic smile stretched across his face. "And this is James over here," Miss Kelsey said, pointing to a different boy. James looked pretty normal to me. He didn't say hi to us, though. He didn't even look at us. "This is Emily over here." The little girl Miss Kelsey pointed to was very cute. She had drool on her face and her hands and arms, and she moaned a lot. A different teacher used sign language as she tried to communicate with Emily. The teacher struggled to maintain eye contact with her. She told Emily to say hi. "That's Miss Warner helping Emily right now." Emily tried to say hi to us, but I could tell she wasn't particularly good at talking. There were a few other children in the room, and Miss Kelsey eventually introduced us to all of them. I became distracted at this point because Jeffrey had walked over to Joey and started playing the game Memory with him. I couldn't believe it. I heard him say, "That's a great job, Joey. You're really smart." And Joey smiled. Anna and I were on our way out with Miss Kelsey and James and Emily to help them do their jobs. Before we left the room, I saw Joey giving Jeffrey a big hug. Okay, this is a little different than the Jeffrey we're used to reading about. What's different? Because I'm surprised to read this. Hayden?
Jeffrey's usually really weird and mean.
Yeah, all we know is he just kind of hates everything, right? He didn't care. Noah?
I think that might be his brother.
Okay. Angie, prediction? Or just a comment?
I think that, well, he's a little boy and he wants to make him feel good.
Okay. So something in Jeffrey wants to make this kid feel good? So there might be some goodness in his heart? Eric?
Maybe, like related.
Okay. Josiah?
Maybe his brother or something has special needs and he wants to and he's nicer to them. Because I will say it makes you different to different people, especially if you have someone
Right.
you're related to.
Because you're used to it every day, right? So maybe he makes that connection and just goes right over. He knows exactly what to do. Noah?
My brother has level 1 autistic.
Uh-huh. So you can kind of relate to this a little bit too. All right. We're almost done with this chapter, and then we will stop. Act 3, Scene 3. Jobs turned out to be sorting the plastic forks, spoons, straws, and napkins for the cafeteria. Miss Kelsey poured the utensils on the table, and James said, 712. I looked at Anna, puzzled. What do you mean, James? I asked. 712, he said again, looking down at the table. Does he always say 712? I asked. I figured he was yelling at random numbers. No, James is telling us that there are 712 utensils on the table, Miss Kelsey said. 712 utensils on the table, James repeated, this time looking at Anna and me and swaying a little as he stood. Great job, James. Miss Kelsey sounded so excited. You looked at our friends when you said that. Miss Kelsey, do you mean James is right? Anna asked. Are there really 712? Is it the same amount every day or something? Well, I haven't actually counted them to double check, and no, it's not always 712, but James has never been wrong before, Miss Kelsey said. Anna and I exchanged astonished looks. I was confused. James had done this amazing counting, but Miss Kelsey seemed more excited that he'd looked at me. I wanted to ask questions, but decided to wait. I didn't know if asking was appropriate. We finished up the jobs and walked back to get Jeffrey. Act 3, Scene 4, last part. Jeffrey was still playing with Joey, as well as a couple of other kids now. He was helping them paint. Jeffrey, I said. He looked up. We have to go back now. Oh, okay. His shoulders slumped. He turned to the kids. I've got to go, guys. I'll be back soon. Then it was hug time again. We thanked Miss Kelsey and headed back upstairs. We didn't talk on the way through the halls. I think we each had too many thoughts in our brains. By the time we reached our classroom, Jeffrey was Grumpy Jeffrey again. Our very own Dr. Heckle and Mr. Hyde, I thought. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's kind of like flip sides of the same person. So sometimes he's really grumpy in the way he is, and other times he's friendly and happy and gives hugs, right? So he's very different. All right, we will see you all later.